Do we have a quorum? I see 1, 2, and a number of others
On Zoom?
on Zoom. I believe we have a quorum.
Yes.
Adjustments to the agenda. I realized I left off report on the food pantry. So
That's
would you
fine.
like to give that at some point in the
Sure.
agenda? Do we have any citizens in the room or online who would like to make comments? Seeing none, perhaps we can move to minutes. And I believe, Rebecca, they're not quite ready for us. But
You're admitting to help? Yes, they're not ready.
I guess I
They'll do better, I swear.
have full confidence. I would just fold in the chair report with this next item that I added here, which is structure of committee and select board recommendation schedule. Anne and I, at the end of the last meeting, briefly discussed this point, and I just want to open it up to the group to kind of examine at this juncture the structure of this committee and the near term, midterm kind of goals or targets that we're shooting for. And one hand, Anne had floated the idea of maybe like a quarterly recommendation schedule for the select board, say, or something like that. I would just be curious to know if other folks have thoughts about how we should think about the goals of this committee or the way that we deal with action items. Does anyone have any thoughts about that?
Well, you got 2 of the right people in the room here to tell us if, certainly if we need more, dialogue with the select board, for example. That makes sense.
Dialogue never hurts. And checking in never hurts.
And we do invite at the committee, we are trying to invite a committee at least a month to give an update, or a department head. So it could be a committee or a department head, so that at least once a year, the committee gets in front of the select board.
Okay.
And if something comes up, I mean, you've always got comments during the select board meeting to come say something as the chair or member of the committee.
And if you're needing guidance from the select board, all you have to do is call up and I can always put that on the agenda. It's not a heavy lift for us.
Okay. But one idea I guess I'm floating to the committee is in order to kind of help us focus our thinking and our research is, say we have quarterly or even if it were twice a year, that we say, in June, we need to assess and deliver a kind of semi-annual report, say, or semi-annual package of recommendations to kind of help us as we have our individual focuses, like Ruben with broadband and with the website and talking about housing. If we can, that maybe would help us kind of figure out, by June, we need to have these things prepared.
I think it also helps us, focus. I know there's nothing like looking at my calendar for the day and seeing, oh, EDC meeting tonight to get my acting gear.
Mhm.
I was very pleased that I actually got my acting gear earlier than that this time. But so I agree.
So I have a suggestion. If we're going to be doing any of that, we should, anything we're making a recommendation on that we hope to get on a town warrant for a vote, that has a timeline, a very specialized timeline. So that would need to be backed out several months in advance of either the November or the June voting. So some things would be separated out if we were thinking to make recommendations that would require a vote or need some kind of a vote. And then other things, in the past, we've never had an issue getting in front of the select board for anything that we wanted to either get their feedback from or that we wanted to put in front of them so they would have an idea of where we were going or where we would like to go. And if we needed their support for something.
I think, for example, just giving the deadlines for the warrants, and Julie will correct me when I'm wrong. There's the March primary, I think, and if I want anything, it would have,
You're late.
I'm already
You're
late.
2 weeks ago. But for June, the cutoff typically
April.
is April 1st.
Okay.
Because the printing's just so far behind, and given the fact this year that it's a presidential primary year, it might even be into March.
Can you give us an idea of things that would require to be on the warrant, like things that,
Anything that you want to spend money on that we
It's-
haven't allocated, so any type of funding would have to go on the warrant. And that has to go before budget committee, so if you were going to say, we'd like to fund this project, whatever it might be, we would need to take that to the budget committee, so that technically would have to be to me by the end of January.
Okay.
So any-
Julie, don't we have to, anything that would be a suggested ordinance or anything like that, wouldn't that needs review on several areas like?
Well, if there's an ordinance you want to put into effect, it depends. If it's a land use ordinance, you're gonna have to deal with planning board. But you'd have to go through, if it's just a regular, I would say, ordinance, if you could go through the select board. And then the select board could put that on, but that date. Something that's not financially involved, that would be definitely before. I would say you'd have to have that in. At least at the very latest March, because you're gonna have to have publication and a hearing on the ordinance for you to put it on the warrant.
And if I don't know if you saw the ordinance that is a suggested ordinance that we're talking about tonight, that would involve monies. That would have to be reviewed by the budget committee, I would imagine the money part of it, right, Julie? Or something?
Money,
If, according to this, they would use should we just skip to this topic at this point? Because
Well, we can jump to that, but I just want to start with the overview of what we're doing here in this committee. And then we can move pretty quickly to that.
I'm just gonna hand this off to Julie so she can.
Okay.
take a read.
Sure. So I actually like the idea that if we take April 1st as an internal deadline, for us, regardless of, advancing something that needs to be voted on for, that requires budgetary approval, maybe we just take that as a cue. And say, April 1st is our deadline for a series of things, website suggestions, sidewalk improvements, whatever ideas we're floating here. I mean, what do you all think of that?
I see Sonia has her hand up.
Go ahead, Sonia.
Yeah, well, with Ann sending in, sorry if I got your name, about the website got me thinking. And I've been looking at the Waldeboro website, but I'm also looking under the land use districts. If we're gonna do for attracting business on our website thing, or if we're gonna have it targeted, don't you think we should have a knowledge of what the land use laws are? Because from what I'm looking at on the land use maps, most of it is rural. Okay, there's a historic district downtown. There's the residential, which just kind of follows the coastline on the ordinance map, where it's the land use map. But it's like, there's only like 2 industrial sections specified in the town, and then there's a development corridor for Route 1. But I'm like, but if you look at the land use restrictions, a good majority of it, you can't do mostly anything, especially in the rural. It's either farming, forestry, or it's that. So we kind of, if we're going to design something or have a plan and have it less complicated, or use a way to, I think you're trying to find a structure. So you set boundaries to what you can work with and what you can't. It's to look at what we have and then go from there. Because you have industrial, light industrial, there's some heavy industry into some of these areas. There's agriculture, aquaculture, forestry, and then something called passive recreation on these land use maps. And I was looking at it and I was going, you have to have planning board or the code officer or somebody approving half of the stuff. But that's what I was looking at.
Hey,
I think we
Sonia, actually the use, if you can get a hold of the use chart, you will find the use chart very, very helpful to further expand on the approved uses, or the uses that need code enforcement improvement or the approval or the planning board approval. Get a hold of that use chart. It looks like an Excel spreadsheet. And
Yep.
that will help a lot to expand the kinds of uses that we have as options in the town and where people have to go to get approval for those.
Yeah, yeah.
I think
Well,
it's a
for
great
me,
point. And
I
also
mean-
has her hand raised here.
I think that, Sonia, while what you're saying absolutely makes a lot of sense, and it's stuff that should be, I think, available probably on a planning part of the website or something. It's a number of layers more detailed than what I was thinking about, just sort of for a first run. So absolutely, I think this is something we need to be aware of. And I'm not sure that that needs to be in the first line of the changes we want to make. At least I wasn't thinking of it, but I'm really glad you brought it up and I really appreciate it.
And I just want to kind of direct this back to the point of how we structure the committee. I do like the idea of taking a deadline like April 1st for an internal and an external deadline. Say we want to recommend things concretely, but also for ourselves to assess kind of what we're doing. Would anybody have any objections to just kind of setting that for ourselves if we have a number of projects we want to, move forward?
That sounds like a great idea.
Because that's kind of
do we have
close
any
to the-
projects? Do we have any projects?
Well, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about possible ordinances. We're talking about website updates and any other things that we want to tackle. There could be a few things.
Have I missed the agenda?
It's in this Dropbox
Okay.
that I linked to.
Okay.
So I guess that would be my suggestion. It doesn't have to be anything concrete, but we can just say, April 1st, we'd like to,
Any project you have going.
yeah,
by April 1st.
exactly. Because then it makes it easier for us to assign maybe research or,
Next steps.
next steps sort of.
I
So
think that makes sense.
it's an idea,
He likes the idea of a biannual report.
a biannual report. I like that idea too. I think that's kind of,
think
and it's
the
something concrete.
The good thing about going to the select board is it should be a two-way conversation. Shouldn't be us saying, oh, here's all the great ideas we have. Hopefully the select board will say, boy, we'd really like if you guys could take a look at this.
Well, I think too, there's some projects that aren't gonna, like, if you guys have an idea of what you want a page of the website to look like, that doesn't have to go to select board.
Right.
Technically, that can
Just do it.
tell us what you want us to, what you would like it to look like. And Tanya and I can hopefully make that happen. So there's things that definitely would need select board approval. And there's things that, I could just say, oh, that's a great idea, we'd love to do that, or that would be wonderful, so.
I see Sonia's hand is still up.
Go ahead,
No, I
Sonia.
think I didn't lower it, but it's everything just, I'm sorry, for me, I'm just trying to catch up and learn what I can about the town, and stuff. But everything seems kind of haphazard. We don't have a structure in what we're approaching for the ideas. Everybody's got an idea for a new website or this, and then we're being told, go to the select board for this ordinance. But for me, I don't know what we want to target in the first place.
That's what we're trying to tackle here is to define more concretely the structure of this committee and the sort of limits, but also the defining exactly the ground that we want to cover. So I think actually the biannual report, as like Ruben stated there, is a great way of structuring and focusing our ideas.
Yeah, and that's kind of how the committee was, I think, when I first got here, where everyone had like a different subcommittee or their own task going on. And this committee was more of just the updates, annual or monthly, like it's kind of defaulted now to Ruben talking about broadband and the growth happening there, and then Jen talking about the food pantry. I talk about the town updates, and then we just need some other projects to give updates on.
One, we've identified, attracting business
Mhm.
and affordable housing for people to work in those businesses that we're trying to attract. So I think that's kind of in terms of direction, those two ideas give us great direction. It's just a matter of saying, what is that going to look like? How are we going to do that?
Right. And maybe we do that by April 1st, then we can use that as our external deadline, but we can also say, we can define concretely, Sonia, to your point, exactly what it is that we're doing, what are our subcommittees consist of.
And Sonia, for the land use items, if that's ever something you want to discuss with me outside these meetings, I don't mind I always love hearing some suggestions for updating the ordinance. And that's something that really wouldn't be something we'd have to do with the economic committee. That's something we can do with the planning board.
Oh, go ahead, Ruben.
Something I want to suggest for one, Conrad, the Dropbox, beautiful. My favorite thing I've seen in a while. Thank you for doing that.
Sure.
Looking at this process and looking at what we might want to write down to test,
What is
the broadband work Max and I have been doing might be a good first thing to run through this process. We're waiting on data from LCI, but it would at the very least be something we could sort of war game with.
Great.
Sylvia, hold on.
Did you get cut off, Ruben?
No, that was my whole statement.
Oh, okay, got it.
That would be ironic.
I was
Oh, yeah,
wondering,
I see what you're saying.
Ruben, how long have we been waiting for this data from LCI?
When were we there last, Max? Just before Christmas?
Just before Christmas.
Just before Christmas.
So, I'm sorry, Max, did I talk over you?
No, go ahead.
So where we left it, and was, we had rough numbers from LCI. So there is progress and you folks haven't seen it. So from this end, it sounds like nothing's happening. They showed us rough numbers and we asked them if they were final, because once we get them, they're public, and they weren't to that state yet. I'm sending out an email tonight to ask for the next update, but my expectation is by the next time we all sit down to have information to run by everyone. And if anyone here ever wants to check on that between meetings, feel free to give me a call, as long as we're not, violating whatever meeting standards or anything we have. We've been having these conversations for, the line blurs, but I want to say 6 or 8 months. We've been working with LCI back and forth for this specific road. We've been having some form of conversation with them for years, which is why it's hard to pin that last number down. I don't think they're delinquent yet in delivering us any data. We're just being super careful, because whatever number we get, I'm sure it's going to be huge, and then we need to split it out and all that. So we're just trying to be sort of slow and accurate.
Yeah, I appreciate your context on that, Ruben. I know that it's a bear of a task to shoulder, and I really appreciate all your work on that.
I
Patty,
appreciate the support.
Hi there. First of all, Conrad, I like the idea of having an April 1st deadline. What we want on that deadline, I think we should try to decide this evening. But if not this evening, can we determine by the next meeting, maybe the top 3 things that we're going to try to have done by April 1st? And if any of those need to go to the select board or the planning board, or we can maybe get that on the March agenda, so
Okay.
that by April 1st, we have some answers.
I don't know if a motion needs to be made at this juncture, but I would say it's a good idea then to say April 1st is kind of our biannual reports / stuff that we need to advance to the budgetary committee, to the select board. And on that biannual report, we can define very clearly what our subcommittees are tackling. So,
So moved.
okay,
Sounds good.
Well put.
all in favor of creating a biannual report by April 1st?
In favor.
The, actually quite don't know how to.
Patty has.
Yep,
Yeah.
I'm in favor.
Patty and Ruben have said their thing.
Yep.
Sonia,
Yeah, hang on, gotta find it. Here it is.
and everyone else had their hand up.
Okay. The yays have it, so
Well,
we will,
Yeah, that was all the approved.
okay,
Is there a no or an abstention from Bob?
Abstention.
okay. All right, so one abstention. Okay, so we will take it that that's our first biannual report of 2024, April 1st.
Can I just say one more thing before we close the conversation? I
Yes.
just want to make clear, and I hope that everybody understands that if we want anything if there's anything financially related that needs the budget committee to look at, we have to get it to the budget committee by the end of January, if I'm right, hearing Julie, what she said before. Okay, so that means like we have 3 weeks.
All right, so budget committee, anything for the budget committee needs to be completed by the end of January. Is that just the end of the month or like a specific date?
I can work with the end of the month.
Okay. All right.
And what's the second deadline if we had to go to the budget committee? Is there a
So
second?
it's making the warrant. So making the warrant would be the April 1st deadline.
Okay. That's the warrant deadline. Okay, so the next thing on the agenda would be town updates. I realize these items are probably not exactly correct, but yeah.
That's fine. I'm gonna skip planning board for now because it kind of ties into congressional delegate spending update. So 80 Gray, the not the rehabilitation, the remediation and the very different remediation and demolition has started. I think they're still targeting January 20th for completing everything. They've already taken down the one-room schoolroom that was across the street, and they're just waiting for the land to get a little bit dry before putting in some of the wood chips to help stabilize that. Reminder that Billy Maxwell is running the brick fundraiser for one weekend only. So if you want to hold on to a piece of history, you give him a call. And he will, I believe it's $5 per brick unless you are Bob Butler, in which case it is $20.
That's right.
I don't wanna try out for free. I'd just like to get to the damn thing.
All right. And I think Conrad, you were telling me this morning, they were able to save a part of the book cement part.
Yeah, that was posted on the Western Waldeboro group, the images of the ornamented cement arch pieces with the book figuration and the some of the high school name and the date. So, yeah, I don't know if they'd be willing to part with those for a donation, but I think you'd have to take that up with
You'd have to talk to
Mack.
Billy about that.
Yeah.
Sylvania and Hofs's house, did the site visit today. I only had one real demolition bid person. The other was an auctioneer who was just trying to see if there was something worth value to probably try and sell. That was about it. So we're now going to wait and see what we get for responses. And then planning board, I'll start with planning board items. For December, we had two subdivisions, two preliminary subdivisions. One was the 10 lot up on Old Augusta Road. That was approved with its preliminary design. So now we're going to wait for the final plan in probably February. And there was a 2-lot subdivision that was approved for its preliminary plan and its final plan because there really wasn't that much to it. So it was approved in total that night. And then there was an event center on 110 Robinson Road that was tabled because it just wasn't deemed to have enough information at the time. And then for this upcoming planning board meeting, I only have 2 pre-applications. One is a 1 megawatt solar farm on Mank Town Road. And the second is Maine Health's medical building at 126 Depot Street. I figure there's going to be questions about it, so I just decided to get the
You
application.
got my attention.
Yeah, I just figured I'd get the application on the screen so that I don't have people asking, can I see it? So everyone online should be able to see it. It's a 16,000 square foot building. So sorry, it's gonna be a bit blurry on the screen here. So this is the topo map that just shows the current building. Here's the current building, Depot Street. And then when we get to new page, you will see the plan is going to be to also purchase 130 Depot Street. Tear down the building at the front entrance so that we can get a widened driveway.
Can you tell us where that is? Like, give me some references to other businesses or buildings.
This was the Fieldcrest Manor or the Bug Tussle Rooter for those who need a more recent name.
Got it.
And then this is just another house. So 130 Depot will be torn down. They'd widen the driveway. And then they would also be tearing down the existing building on site. And then moving,
Abating and tearing.
abating and tearing down, thank you. And then the medical building would be built a bit closer to the water, but still about 80 feet away from this identified wetland area. And then parking, and then future public access if there's interest. Then I think the other page is just a floor plan.
And I'm assuming there's no community center involved.
There is no community center proposed with this proposal.
Okay.
This is just the planning, because we don't have our ducks in a row, we're not really involved in this. This is just Maine Health proposing the site work and their building.
That would be terrific though, wouldn't it?
The site can also hold a community center
At a future date.
At a future
at a
date.
future date.
Got
And
it.
if that's the direction which it may go,
The town would have to back it, first of
Yep.
all.
the town would have to vote on that
Yes.
before it's even built. But infrastructure can be made so that it can be site ready.
Yes. And that's kind of why this is done the way it is. There's all these different areas. Maine Health made their area with where they would expand if needed. If the town is interested, and that's why I say get our ducks in a row. Then it probably would be years down the line, but it's
Okay.
here.
Can I ask one more question? Did they buy the property
I think it's under.
It's under contract.
under contract?
One of their conditions was just going through the planning board process, because
Okay.
it doesn't make sense to buy the property if you can't do this sort of thing.
Awesome.
Any other questions on this? Because I,
Really huge.
um. All right, and the planning board will be meeting on January 18th this month. Just because January 11th was a bit tight on time, and I figured for Maine Health specifically, we wanted to have a little bit more notice. So we're gonna have some ads running in the paper this week and next week, and then we'll have it on the 18th. We're gonna notify neighbors just because we don't have to, but I don't want anyone telling me I didn't notify them about a big project in their backyard.
What time will that be? 6?
6 p.m.
Can I ask a question? Does it influence like whether a light would be put at Route 1 in the intersection there or anything? Is there any discussion of that?
So because it's on Depot Street, Maine DOT would not be involved, but I might have to I'm gonna talk to DOT because they might be interested in their 3-year plan, even if it's not something Maine Health has to deal with. DOT might.
Okay.
If DOT's hearing, oh, Maine Health's gonna be here in a year or two, so that's gonna pick up the traffic there.
They might.
They might want to actually put something in their 3-year plans.
Mhm.
Could be a light, maybe it'll be a.
Maybe it'll be a circle.
That's exactly what I was gonna say.
A circle at the end of my road in Damascus, so. A rotary, excuse me.
A rotary, a 1-lane rotary,
No, it
that's what
would
we're
be a
getting.
Rotary, I'm being totally facetious, but, it does lend itself to that, and then they are lightly aware of it.
I just wondered because it's not so bad this time of year, but in summer it gets kind of tricky to get out.
Definitely gonna get a lot of traffic.
It would be very nice for, personally speaking, for me to exit.
Yeah, well, and also
Give me
if
Julie's light, you
it
know.
was tied in with the emergency services where they could change it too to make it.
Oh, it
safer
would be
for them to
lovely.
get.
Well, and because Main Health's gonna now be on Depot Street, that's gonna pick up some traffic from people who are trying to go either left lane from Route 1 there or trying to cross from Jefferson.
And it also might help that we can finally get the speed on Depot Street adjusted properly. Because that's been an ongoing issue with the student.
A lot can happen.
All right, let's keep this moving along.
And then I think that kind of ties into the congressional delegate spending update I had as well, just. That's pretty much it.
Okay,
There's-
Max, there is one more thing. I don't know if it's on your agenda, but the downtown.
The downtown, I will get to that in just a sec. With the congressional delegate spending, I do have to put an ad in the paper just to say that project's happening. So that's just gonna be an ad people will see in the coming weeks. It's very different from what's happening with the planning board. It's just saying it has to go through an environmental review process, kind of like what happened with 80 Gray, saying abatement's gonna happen, demolition's gonna happen, and then a building's gonna happen. It's just a required federal process. And then, yes, as Julie said, the other update is a downtown forum. We are gonna be having a meeting. I was looking at January 30th. That didn't look, it's a fifth Tuesday, so there's no regular meetings then. And it gives me more time to also put it together. It'll just be a forum / discussion to talk about the Worcester parking lot, to get some perspective on that. I'll go over the Village Partnership DOT grant that we submitted an application for to show where the speed tables would be and our hopeful timeline. I'm hoping DOT, I've kind of held off for a bit because I was waiting for DOT to give me an answer for when we might hear about that. Hopefully we'll get something by then.
Hmm.
And then the third would just be getting really any other discussion from people in the downtown about what they would like to see going forward with it while we're talking about, because we already have the speed tables, we have the parking lot, but is there something else that's missing that people want to raise? I wish it was on December 23rd, because then it could be a Festivus thing, but no. Religious holidays and all that. Cool. I think that was it.
wait, so that date has not been set? What do you say?
I'm hoping it's gonna be January 30th at 6 PM, but I will make sure there's a Facebook post when that's happening.
Okay. So moving on to old business, actually, maybe this would be the juncture to give your
Sure.
food pantry.
Yeah,
statistics.
so we had our food pantry today. I don't have the numbers in yet in terms of families, but we did have a pantry as well 2 weeks ago, and I have the numbers for that. Now, we actually had to postpone the pantry on the Tuesday because of weather. So our policy is, and this is good if people are listening in, our policy is the food pantry, if the schools are closed, we're closed. So if the schools shut down on the Tuesday, then the pantry doesn't have distribution. And our policy is if the following day is okay weather-wise, we do our distribution the following day, which is what we did. So we had our distribution on the Wednesday. And we had, so even with that delay and the confusion, we had 147 households, 381 clients, which were made up of 119 children, 195 adults, and 67 seniors. So that's kind of the mix. The other thing that I have that's interesting. The average, so this is interesting, the average number of households that came to the pantry in 2022 was 122. And the number of clients was 302. And if you look at 2023, the average went up to 143 families and 366 clients.
And just to add to that, the day after you had the pantry, we had the Christmas basket giveaway.
And we were so thankful to get the bits that were left over
That were
as
left
part of
over.
our distribution.
So we had 160 requests for baskets. And I'm gonna say about 15 didn't show up. I think we made more bags than we needed, because you're never sure. 'Cause
Yep.
you don't want to turn anybody away.
Yeah.
So anything we had left over, it was great, because the food pantry van went with our rec director to pick up the food, the meat at Hannaford. So it worked well. We were able to keep the meat outside in the very cold temperatures. And then it made it a lot easier for them to pack up, and anything that wasn't picked up. And I just wanted to say that I think it worked really well doing it like that.
Yeah.
So we're not sure if our drop off of less than 160 picking up was because the pantry was the day before, or people just forgot, because we did make it a point, Tanya and I called every person on that list.
Yeah.
Before Thursday, and then at 12 o'clock, I started calling everybody who hadn't picked up to remind them. So everybody got at least, if they didn't pick up, they got at least 2 phone calls, making sure that they knew people were there. So that's where
And I think there's some crossover, but not as much as you would expect
there's not as much as
between
you
the
think.
two client lists,
Yes.
you know.
I was just wondering how the food pantry fundraising has been going.
So we're actually about to go into a new venture of fundraising. So but what we do have is our annual appeal is out circulating right now, and that's been very, very strong. Boy, I don't have the numbers with me, but I could say that I believe it's been in the $25,000 to $30,000 range.
Did that meet your budget?
It has, we have, I mean, I should say, no, it hasn't. So we need more fundraising through the year, which we do.
Okay, but you do set an amount you're.
Oh, we do
looking to
set, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and I don't have it, Natalie does the numbers for us, but.
Yep.
It's, you know, our budget's in the, the $100,000 range.
And
You know, annually.
For fundraising, is that, what's the target?
Yeah,
for
the
fundraising?
target, well, we're 100% donations.
Right.
Except, obviously we get a contribution now from the town, which is very helpful. But, we're running on donations.
Okay.
That's how we survive.
Yeah.
So, and the thing, I mean, I may as well put it out there. So, and this is no secret, we need a new facility bad. And, we're in we're thankful that we're at the Madomic House. And, Ron and Peggy have been terrific in being good landlords and giving us space, but our space is limited. I think we have maybe 1,000 square feet in that building. So our only option for distribution is drive-through.
Right.
We and most food pantries understand that clients don't really appreciate, well, they're appreciative of getting food, but they would much rather have a shopping experience where they could get, the kind of products that they want. They might not like pork. And so they'd have the ability to get beef or chicken or fish or whatever they want. Whereas with drive-through, if they get pork, they get pork. So we really need to have a shopping experience, but in order to do a shopping experience, you need tons of parking and you need a larger facility. And so we know that we need a new place, a new home. And so, part of our fundraising is setting some money aside for capital. So that we're able to, when the time comes, we're able to at least make a down payment or do, get rolling on a property.
Yep.
But we just can't find one. We've looked and looked and there's just very little available that would be suitable for a pantry, even land. Finding enough land, we got to stay relatively close, just same things you guys do when you look for a community center. You got to stay relatively close to the village. You can't be, 5 miles out of town for a pantry. And so our challenge is to try to find property, within a reasonable distance of the village or, attached to the village almost. And we just haven't been able to do that. But that's our goal, and we know we have to do it.
Yeah. ahead,
Does
Bob.
having that lengthy driveway help in terms of traffic control? I'm thinking of Augusta, when I go up there for meetings.
Yeah.
There'll be a line of cars, I would say half a mile long.
Yeah.
Holding to the right, you've got to
Yep.
go by them to get into their food pantry.
Yep.
Usually on a Thursday or Wednesday morning. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
So we, so today's a good example. So I do the deliveries. So I drive the van and we do deliveries
That's right,
to
got the
Coal
van.
Hill and we deliver to Waldeboro Village.
Yep.
And to Sproul Block. So, and that kind of gets rid of a lot of the traffic that we would normally see. So we try to reduce the drive-through traffic by doing some deliveries.
Yep.
But when I return the van at probably around noon, maybe 12:30, the lineup was out onto Friendship. I mean, they get out onto the road.
And part of the problem is, and we experienced that, there's a line when we do the Christmas baskets. I don't think people realize you're all getting the same thing.
Right, right.
You know, you're all getting the same thing. If it's from 11 to 5, whether you come at 11 or you come at 5, you're getting the same thing. And I think that's part of what we have to try to get out there is you don't have to be right here at 11, you know.
Yeah, we've actually made the point of asking people to leave if they're early.
Yeah.
To prevent a lineup from forming, because we can get cars through pretty quick. But still, there's so much, you got 140 cars
Yeah.
coming through.
I mean, we had them when we were doing it here at the town office during COVID, when we helped.
Well, yeah, you know exactly what it's like. Yeah.
There was a line down Route 1 at times, you know,
Yep.
so.
And we're seeing that kind of, just imagine, we're seeing that kind of volume of families every distribution now.
Well, when at our height, we did 146 was our highest.
Yeah,
in
and
the
our
town.
highest is, I think now 165, I think, from Thanksgiving. Sorry.
This is really valuable information and good to know about the facility needs of the organization too, which I wasn't aware of. So that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, in the interest of time, let's keep moving here because Anne, could you tell us about your suggestions for the website, which I think are really, really valuable? I had to look at it. Maybe you could just summarize it quickly and then see if we can move on that.
Sure. I spent some time looking primarily at the Rockland website, simply because it seemed to be, it's geographically nearby in terms of size, it's relatively similar. And it had something that I really thought was useful, if somebody's coming through and looking at the website. And again, I'm thinking of someone who doesn't have a really clear vision. I'm totally going to do this, in which case they would immediately go to Max and they would have things nailed down. But someone who's thinking, gee, I'd like to move to Maine, but if I did, and I kind of like to start a business, but how do I even start? Of course, part of this is my own background, which is coming from a family of educators who wouldn't know how to start a business if it fell on them. And so I liked the very friendly approach that Rockland did of doing business right there on the main page. So the first thing I looked at was structurally, how could we add something to that, to our website? Well, easily, trying to say, how could we do this easily, is a bit of a non-starter on the Waldeboro website because our navigation is horizontal. So that in order to add on the front page, doing business in Waldeboro, we just don't have the room. I put the picture here in the little handout. And Rockland solves that problem by having it down on the vertical, which just makes it adds flexibility over the long term. If we want to add anything, you know, not only doing business, but the exciting theater opportunities that are, you know, part of the Waldo, et cetera, et cetera. Or a deeper dive into available land or something like that. So I think, but what I'm looking for is, first off, what's a quick fix? Secondly, what is something to think about going forward? Should we decide to do a wholesale revamp, reconstruction of the website, which we're not going to do right now. We are not, it's not going to happen right now. But I think it's important that as we start generating ideas around this, we capture those ideas for the future. So the other thing that caught me when I looked more closely at the Rockland site is that a lot of the things that they direct people to are simply useful resources. Things like they have, again, if you think about the website, on their main page, there's doing business. You start off with this, you click through, you get this wonderful discussion of how nice it is to do business in Rockland and various statistics about growth and opportunities and age of the workforce and so forth. And then they say, if you need financing, we can help you with that. Well, that sounds very exciting. So you click through, oh boy. And then you discover that, yes, you can go and talk to their, I forgot how many people they have in their town planning staff, but let's say they have 3. So somebody there might help you, but also they direct you to CEI, Coastal Enterprise Incorporated, which has a venture capital funding arm, and they've got various other funding programs, but it's absolutely no time or skin off anybody's nose in town if these people approach CEI. There's Maine Center for Economic Development and something else. There's another D up in Augusta, another group that here's the contact information. Go get them, Tiger. So there's a lot of being useful that we can do without a huge amount of effort on our own parts, except to go through once a month, once a year, make sure none of the links are broken.
Right.
So I was just kind of excited about that as a way of seeming helpful without loading yet another thing on the very overburdened plates of our town officers or the select board or the planning board. So I was thinking about that and thought that our first quick fix would be to add a doing business in Waldoboro or do business in Waldoboro subheading under how do I?
Right.
So bonk, and then you get into looking at some of the things. Why do you want to do business in Waldoboro? So I'll draft something if people are okay with that. And maybe work with Max with it a little bit. We can talk to Jen about Waldoboro business or swipe some of the stuff from your material, Jen. Just put up something about why are we excited about being in Waldoboro? And why should somebody else be in Waldoboro? And then they say, if you want to start up, here's a link. If you want to relocate, here's a link. Well, I was like, okay, well, let's check out this relocating thing. The relocating thing links you to the town office. Okay, that makes sense. But also to Zillow. So
On the Rockland page.
on the Rockland page.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, I think that's a little self-evident. So maybe I'd chat with Jen Poole, Jess Pooley, Jessica Pooley, and find out, is there some place that someone who's starting a business should talk to, or should we just put them in touch with you? Put a link right there to Waldoboro Business Association in addition to where it already is on the website. Just kind of doing some cross-referencing of some of the things we already have. So this finance your business on the Rockland site, which talks about the micro loan application or the micro loan program for Knox County.
Which is run by the city, right? That's a municipal program.
It's a county
Or
program.
county.
That was an old county program.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if it even still exists.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of outdated information on that. For example,
Yeah.
MCED does not exist anymore.
Okay,
It's MCOG and I work for them.
Okay, right, so
Okay.
we're gonna be even better than Rockland. And then there's Maine Center for, when I worked for them, they were Maine Center for Enterprise Development, and now I think there's something else. But they have lots of training programs. They've got a boot camp, they've got various other things for people who want to start businesses in Maine, and they're quite credible. But they're not mentioned here. We could put it there, sort of you want to do a startup. And then, of course, there's, SBA, there's CEI, which are for people who've done businesses, it's yawn, but if you're relatively new and you're trying to figure it out, it makes us look helpful. And that's, the more we can appear helpful and interested in having businesses come in, it seems to me, especially if we're not adding more to Julie and Max's workloads, the better off we are. So that's a very long way of walking you all through it, but that my idea, and I would move that I would be happy to have anybody work with me on it who wanted to, but that I undertake writing up a how do I do business in Waldoboro section that talks about why should you come and do business in Waldoboro, and then work with some, get some help from you, Max. I will, spend 30 minutes together or something to pull together what's available for the financing and so forth options. And a little link to Waldoboro Business Association, maybe a link to Lincoln County News, a link to what's new Waldoboro. So these are the ways you can get up to speed a little faster. And if people think this is a bad idea, stop me.
It's a good idea, and don't get too. We can make adjustments to the layout.
Okay.
Like, don't just think, oh, well, we can't be up on the top. That doesn't mean you can't be on the top. It doesn't mean we can't give you one of the boxes in the middle. It's just, we've never developed that aspect of it. So you come up with the pages of what you want and the links, we can make it happen. It's just a matter of somebody writing it.
Okay.
It certainly seems like low-hanging fruit to integrate Waldoboro Business Association to, as you even suggested, point that just direct people to the Economic Development Committee page if you want, and all the other things you mentioned. That seems like low-hanging fruit to me.
Okay.
And I would probably also just add the community development block grants, like just talk about the history we've done with them. We've done it with Audio Wives, we've done it with Volunteers of America. I think that's something that would get some people.
Even like the spotlight, have Audio Wives sit down and maybe talk about their experience, even if you just did like a quick video of
That's
like,
brilliant.
what their experience has been. These are all things that we love to do. It's just when you have a staff of
Half a
you
person.
can't do it.
And that's to me, I mean,
Yeah.
Sonia was wondering what we're supposed to do. And my feeling is that what we're supposed to do is fill in those gaps, the things that, as you were saying, Conrad, low hanging fruit. We can do it and put it together, and then it can go up there and be available. So where we see a gap, if it's agreed that it's a project we should do, one of us or a couple of us in a subcommittee says, okay, let's move it forward. So that's great, but I'd love to do that with the block grants, Volunteers of America. I was thinking it would be nice to have some pictures of, things that would make people feel like, ooh, great place. Odd alewives in the summer when their gardens are blooming, perch looking cozy on a fall, night or something. Just kind of give Waldoboro a little love, which all of us who live here do, but people from outside, yes, Bob.
When Sonia was talking about the ordinance,
Mhm.
what came to my mind was the need to emphasize, because this is what we did when we came to Waldoboro. You have home businesses by ordinance allowed in Waldoboro. That's a huge share of what people in this town do.
Mhm.
And knowing that there's a structure in place that lets you do it. I think that ought to be one of the first things you talk about when you start to talk about doing business in Waldoboro.
And part of the problem with a website administered by the town is that we know what we're looking for.
Right.
So it's good when somebody from outside who isn't part of the town looks at it and says, this is where it could be more helpful or user friendly, because we're looking at it like, oh yeah, we would know what we mean, but you might not know what we mean.
Well, and then of course, oh yeah, Billy Maxwell, of course, we'll talk to Billy Maxwell. Well, sure, he's a lovely guy, but
So, yeah, I think, if there, I don't know if there are any objections to this, if anyone wants to weigh in on this, but
And I said this in the email, and Julie's here, so I'll confirm it. So Anne would put together something and we'd run it by you for final approval.
Yeah, it doesn't have to go to the select board.
okay,
It's
great.
easy.
so maybe the best thing to do is to come up with the draft of this, circulate it, and we can give our comments or edits.
Mhm.
And then by next meeting, we can have this done.
I'll do my best.
And just,
Just tell my clients to back off.
Well, if you think that's a good timeline, I mean,
I'll at least have a draft by next meeting. I will do my best to have a draft that's gone out and circulated and gathered commentary by next week.
okay, so I really like the idea of low hanging fruit first. So I love the idea of saying, well, here's some real simple things we could do right now. You know, like a video would be a wonderful idea, but you know, like maybe what we do is say, here's the low hanging fruit.
In the
Here's the-
fall, in the winter, this is not gonna be a good time to.
Right. So, but what you could do is say, yeah, but you know what, here's a space.
Yeah.
Where we could put these.
Right.
And so get the low hanging fruit on the web, on the town page.
right.
But have an understanding that we're gonna add these 8 things over the year. And have actually, you know, have an idea in your mind what that's gonna look like.
So what I'm hearing is that this draft for the next meeting doesn't have to be extremely comprehensive. It can be a really basic doing business in Waldeboro page
Yeah,
that we're setting up. Great.
Any chance we could do a button, like a donate button, but doing business in Waldeboro button?
There's something, I
Buttons are
have
easy.
to, you're getting a little complicated,
Yeah.
but,
You're asking tech questions. at
you're
7
asking
PM.
tech questions that I'll have to ask my
But-
tech
But
person.
versus it being buried in a, you know,
Yeah, I mean, I can
A drop
ask them
down menu.
what they can do, but we'll figure it out.
awesome.
That was to her point about the horizontal versus vertical.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll take it. Okay.
It's funny that
All right, so this next one is gonna be more involved, so I don't know what we can get done. I don't want to hold everybody all night long, but this is back to the ADU stuff. So there were several documents in this Dropbox folder about this. I would just point everybody to the main policy innovation ADU report. This is something that Max sent to me last month. And this Governor's Office of Policy Innovation in the Future had this meeting, and they produced this report in November, and their recommendations for ADU, accessory dwelling unit creation, basically says municipal number 3, recommendation number 3, municipal incentives should be established for ADUs, including tax increment financing or property tax relief. Their recommendation number 1 is a financial incentive program such as a grant, deferred loan, or interest buy down should be established to offset the cost of ADUs. That recommendation is something that Waldeboro couldn't do. But recommendation number 3 is something that Waldeboro could potentially do. So Bob last month asked me to pull up some example ordinance language. There's one here, Anchorage, Alaska, 2022 ADU ordinance draft. This is something that wasn't passed in this form, but it's a good model for how another municipality had defined ADUs for workforce housing or for lower income folks, and a way to sort of calculate the potential rise in property tax and how that might be offset by some program like this. So there's one in Anchorage. I also found a HUD 2008 policy report on ADUs. So this is quite a while ago, but it's interesting to see the examples, the case studies that they included in this 2008 report. So I would direct everybody's attention actually to in that ADU HUD 2008 policy report. If you go down to page B2, there's an example here from Santa Cruz, California, an ordinance that was created. So this would have been 20 years ago. But on page B2, there's a sub category of this ordinance that says units eligible for fee waivers. So their idea was to if you're renting to low income households, you can apply for a waiver of development fees, building permits, building fees, so on. And that's something that could potentially be included in this as well. So that said, I very quickly just put together a skeleton ordinance for Waldeboro, which is included in this folder. None of this should be taken literally. It's really just to create a skeleton and to get in
draft.
It's a total draft, and I just wanted to throw something together to see how it lands, or what your concerns would be about creating this kind of ordinance. So opening the floor to anybody's comments about this, about how we would structure this, who's eligible, where the problems might be. Sonia. Go ahead. Oh, I think your mic is muted.
Okay, yeah. So I just happened to come across stuff this week coming out of California, Washington State, and Oregon. A lot of complaints in neighborhoods about the accessory dwelling units. If you're gonna think about doing something there, you should do some kind of structure, what they're allowed to do. There were some in California, one was in Van Nuys. They basically built a hotel. And the neighbors were all complaining because they're in and out and it's students living in there. And I can understand someone needing to find a way, but you should look at what the complaints are too. And if you're going to be adding some kind of ordinance, take a look at what's going on with that.
It's a good
You know.
point. And I know that there are a number of communities that have had a kind of NIMBY attitude about ADUs. And apparently Waldeboro is not one of them, because they permitted ADUs long before LD 2003, which is the new legislation that forces everybody to allow ADUs.
I think that's an important point, is that it's not like we're creating a new or allowing something to happen that isn't allowed now. It's allowed now.
Right.
We're just trying to give it a little push, essentially.
Right. And this is only half the story. I mean, if you're trying to get people to create new mother-in-law apartments to rent to local workers, the construction aspect is the biggest hurdle. So it's how do they get financing? And that's not something that we can directly address. But this is the other side of it, to say, not only would the town like you to do that, we'd like to help you a little bit by giving you a small rebate.
And the thing I'll add on to Sonia's point and what you're talking about with us already allowing accessory apartments, I think you're allowed to have just the one accessory apartment in the state, and that's up to maybe 900 square feet once we pass our LD 2003 changes. That was the other thing I forgot to bring up in the town updates, that planning board should be all set. So I'll send the language off to the attorney at some point when the language is ready to go.
Do we have any idea how many ADUs there already are?
I'd have to probably ask Daryl that. And I'm
But-
scared to.
I know, because at 1,000, like, I think that's the financial reality, is we have to look at,
Where to make a cutoff.
yeah,
And there's different ways of structuring this. The
Right.
way that I wrote this was, if you have an ADU and you rent it to somebody and you can show that they're working locally, you get a rebate. Another way is to say, if you create a new ADU,
Yeah.
you're eligible, but if you have an existing one, you're not. So, and the other thing is that I know that Mark had brought up a lot of ADUs that are not recognized
code.
as such, or they're not up to code. So then this might encourage people to bring them up to code by waiving those permit fees.
and $1,000 is just a placeholder.
It's a total placeholder.
Right.
Sonia has her hand up.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Sonia.
Why are they called accessory dwelling units? Are you building another house or a shed in the backyard? Is that what that is?
Yeah,
What's
Usually,
it-
usually you wouldn't be building them unless you've already had a single family dwelling unit on it, and they just say accessory dwelling unit because it's just another one of the uses, but it's usually supposed to be so small that it's not like a family unit or something. It's supposed to just be an apartment. So we still call them accessory apartments. I still like the term accessory apartments. I don't know why accessory dwelling units is the default thing, but
Well, because some of them are, separate. I've seen things that are, who is it? Brightville doesn't it? It's their sidekick. And they have up to it is a 3-bedroom is their biggest. And the idea is that it's not huge. It's maybe 1,000 square feet.
All right.
Jen,
Did you have anything before heading out? or-
So
Yes.
accessory dwelling units is the term that's used across the whole United States. And it's meant to describe anything that it could be a renovated attic, a renovated basement into a living unit. It could be even something over the top of the garage. It could be an extension on one side of the house, and it could be a separate small dwelling unit. And that's what it is, Sonia. It's just a term that for people to talk, professionals especially to talk and know what they're talking about. That's what they're calling it across the country.
What I'm wondering is whether it would. Perhaps what we want to do is. Take this, which I think is a super start. Look at what you mentioned, Sonia, if you could send those links around. Look at the material that you've included here as well. And circulate comments, thoughts, ideas, and have a more fleshed out version to discuss next month.
Sounds great.
Would that sound reasonable?
especially knowing that if we were going to send this off for a warrant, it's due April 1st. So
Right.
we've got a couple months, although at the end, if this requires budgetary approval, we'd have to have some, okay.
Because we're dealing with TIFs.
Because we're dealing with the TIF, we don't need budgetary.
We wouldn't be doing the budget. I mean, it's possibly a good idea to give them a heads up on that, just because they probably just want to know about it. But yeah, this would be something that the select board would handle on their own.
Okay, so April 1st is the deadline we're looking at, so we have to work back from that. Yeah, and this one, I just included this, a waiver on building permits. The way that I wrote it out here is essentially you would have to sign a statement of intent to rent your ADU for workforce housing. And then if you weren't eligible at the end of the year, perhaps the town could claw back those building permits fees from you. I don't know how you would, that was just.
Yeah,
just
that's
an
something we'd have to flush out a lot more and then have. an
It might be
look at it.
easier
yeah.
if they were rebated to you at the end of the year.
Right, right.
It's always hard to get money out. So
Bob,
Pay
Bob
up
has
front.
his hand up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I wouldn't throw out the building permits, especially given all the code enforcement issues we have
Yeah.
with existing units. And this is Maine.
Yeah.
So, it's all kind of haphazard anyway. And the last thing you want to do is put yourself into the position of having approved a structure.
And then have to go back.
I think I'll ask Mark how much an accessory dwelling units usually cost for a building permit, because sometimes it's not that much. I talked with Daryl a bit more about what a tax for an accessory apartment would be.
Yeah,
It's like $20.
okay,
I mean, it adds tens of thousands on the value of the land, but when we're talking about how much someone's annually paying for an accessory apartment,
it's pretty nominal.
it's not, it's
But
not.
I'm
Yeah.
with my marketing hat on, it sounds great. It's great PR. Build an ADU. Get your permit fees, refunded at the end of a year of successful renting to a person who works in the area.
I think the main reason to think about a waiver is, I know Mark wants to really work on bringing people into compliance, and maybe that's a psychological hurdle for people reporting if they have an ADU.
I think the other reason why I might favor more of the rebate rather than the waiver is if we have it that says you get $1,000 at the end of the year for having this thing, they can do whatever they want with $1,000. It could go to funding back that building permit.
Right, yeah.
Right.
True.
Or it could go towards maybe the septic or something.
Right.
I like your idea of giving them a break on their taxes. If they prove they're renting to somebody who is new in town and who needs workforce housing.
Right.
So
That
it's
I
a-
think really resonates.
and that's a double win because the
Yes.
town, first of all, knows that an apartment's being built.
That's right.
And so the value of the property is going to increase.
Yep.
And that we'll be able to capture that tax increase. But if we do an incentive for 5 years or some period, but at the end of that period, the town's gonna capture that tax increase.
Yep, and we
So-
can also have some gauge of workforce housing. I mean, who's
Right,
coming to
right.
town?
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, I met a new Marine officer yesterday who wants to live in Waldeboro. He can't find a place to live.
exactly.
Doesn't exist.
No,
Sonia had her hand up.
Sonia, go ahead. You're muted.
They haven't in all these corners yet to get the mouse to one corner or the other.
Yeah,
But anyway, have anybody thought about boarding houses? They used to do that during the Depression. You got a room and a bath and a meal.
kind of.
Yeah.
There, and, yeah, and there's actually an, is it publicly traded company that's doing single room SROs, single room occupancy.
Oh.
I think that's the acronym. I found an article about it recently and I'll dig it up. Because of course, as with everything, there's benefits. It's, cost effective. But there are also drawbacks in that some people complain that particularly for women, they don't have the kind of security they'd like to have and so on and so forth. Again, a lot of times the bad stories make the headlines. And the question becomes, how do we adjust it? Or make sure that adequate safeguards are being taken?
Mhm.
But I'll find that article.
That's interesting. I mean, that's a slightly different angle. The last thing also, Sonia has mentioned in the past programs available through Maine Housing.
Mm.
And there is such a program for a grant program for homeowners to do energy improvements, renovations to their house. But you have to be below a certain income threshold to get those, just to kind of summarize something that was come up in the last two meetings. Patty.
I'm just touching on the boarding house concept. There is by default people already living in that sort of collaborative housing type places, not just in Maine, but other places where it's shared housing. If you go online and look for rentals, people are renting the rooms. You're sharing everything else in the house. It's common. So it's a similar thing. Roommates tend to, have a vote on who's moving in, et cetera. It's not quite the same as public directed or funded boarding houses, but it's the same concept and it's already happening because of the lack of housing.
Yep.
So I don't know what we can do to encourage some of that or help regulate some of that if it's necessary, but I know of one in Portland that is just women,
Yeah.
to your point. So,
Oh,
The ordinance could, you know what, I'll save it for later when we're all done.
Sonia.
Okay, yep, and I forgot about company housing. Big factories used to put up housing. We're not talking about Animal House. We're talking about Lockheed in the town of Marietta. Half of it were these duplex, 2-bedroom homes with kitchens, and a living room and bedrooms, but there were some complaints down in St. George, like the Black Harpoon, because it takes you an hour to get to that area for business. They had a huge attic and they wanted to get permission to create dorm rooms for the employees to stay at while they were on shift. Now, there's complications with something like that because if you provide food or shelter, there's taxes on it because it's considered salary. You might want to look at something where it's not taxable to the employer to give them some side of incentives to provide room and board, like hotels. They can have some of the rooms for their staff for cleaning in the summer stuff. There's people that have houses and they rent them to the foreign interns on the J training visas, that type of thing. But there's other options like that can help with the employer. You want to be in conjunction, if you want a business to come into the area and be operative and be able to be feasible, you might look at doing some things for them to make it more affordable for them to help provide housing, mostly for temporary workers. But if it's a full-time thing year round, they always have the caretaker, quote unquote. Just something else I was thinking of.
It's an interesting idea that would apply to businesses of a certain size. But certainly that's been the case in the 19th century before.
Yeah, not necessarily farms.
Right.
They had, apple pickers, they put them up in rooms, that type thing, travelers for that. But it's not so much anymore. They have to provide, a lot of them, the blueberry pickers, you can see them sometimes, a field full of trailers, travel trailers. They're
Yep.
picking the fields, but they're moving and they're doing certain farms in the area. That type thing. But if you had something, just, it might help with farms if you want to encourage farms that they can have farm labor homes. Stuff. I think Fluker does something with interns and he gets refunded by the state for their salaries and he pays them like $2.50 an hour. But he puts them up in there and in one of his barns, he has some things set up. But you might want to check with him on that, what the rules are about that. But yeah, okay,
That's
well,
really
that's
interesting.
enough. Okay.
That's an interesting idea, actually, to think about. But I think to wrap this discussion up, because we're going late, I'm happy to, well, I've just circulated this ordinance and maybe between now and next month, folks can submit their comments or concerns about how this might be structured, and then we can come up with a more formal ordinance next month. Sounds good. All right, new business. Does anyone have any comments, anything they want to introduce as a potential project or a new topic next meeting?
Got a pretty full plate.
Yeah. And
I'd just like to commend you, Conrad, on, your first meeting and thank you for managing it so well.
thank you.
It's always tough when it's sort of hybrid.
And it's sort of like speaking to the ghosts in the room.
Yeah.
Okay,